Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. Sorry, I had my phone on as well. And welcome to Pambili Analytics webinar. Uh, the, this is the second webinar we have this month. And this webinar for today will be on business analysis. It's from Feroza, will be our facilitator for today. And I just want to read to you her biography, and then I will hand over the reins to her. So before I read her bio and introduce her, please feel free to engage with us throughout the webinar when she is presenting. You can use the chat function to um, to write your comments or your question, and we also have a Q&A function if you want to use that to post any question. But as she goes through her material and give you the nuggets and the tips and tricks, please don't be shy to also raise some comments on the chat, do some likes there if something resonates well with you. There are emotions or emojis functionalities also available for you to engage. Let's make this session more interactive. And when it comes to question and answer session, please let's make sure that we engage with the facilitator and ask those burning questions that we have. There are no right or wrong answer or no foolish questions. So please do ask so that you can leave here with your cup full and learn. So uh, the presentation for today is done by Feroza, and Feroza is a passionate technology professional with 8 years of experience in the software development industry. She has worked in both telecommunication and financial sector. She holds a BCom information system from the University of the Western Cape and has taken on roles, on roles as business analyst and project manager across projects. Beyond her core roles, she is deeply committed to community and mentorship program. I met Feroza through the Girls in Tech. She was one of my mentee. I've helped also Feroza. She has helped organize tech meetups as well as being actively involved in mentorship, especially for young women entering the tech industry, and also creating spaces for growth, learning, and representation for those young women. She thrives on collaboration, continuous learning, and using technology to drive meaningful impact. Let's give Feroza some loving and show her some love and welcome her as she takes over and present. Over to you, Feroza.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was such a nice introduction. And thank you, everyone, for choosing to spend your evening here learning and making the effort to show up for yourselves. So, yeah, it's 6 p.m. on a Tuesday. Thanks for your time. And I look forward to presenting to you some of the things that I've learned and engage with you and yeah, just take you through some of my findings and learning because I think business analyst is one of the more tricky roles. You can never fully, there's always something you can learn depending on what role or what project you are, or if it's something completely new. So, yeah, I think let's get into it. Um, I've also worked as my title was professional role, but I've done business analysis, project management, a bit of testing, but not as a QA. So, yeah, that's just a bit about some of my roles that I've done. And yeah, let's get started with business analysts. So I don't know how if people in the audience are very have many years of work experience or you guys are entering the job market, but wherever you are, I hope that sometimes it's nice to even have a refresher and just go into, reinvigorate things that we've learned and things that we know, just to kind of help us in our daily, work activities and the analysis process, because it's sometimes not as easy, or you can share tips and learn something that you might not have knew before, or something you have learned and just, haven't really got a chance to practice. So yeah, let's dig into it. So I chose this topic, business analysis, um, writing requirements that deliver value. So the business analysis function or role varies depending on the industry you're in, the company that you're in, and the way they do things. I know the term business analyst is interchangeably used as a product owner. So it's really someone who understands the business process of what business wants. And when you go in as a business analyst, it's very important for you to understand your what the client wants, or what is the purpose of what you're building. Because very often
Sorry, Feroza, you are muted.
oh sorry sorry guys, can you guys hear me now? Okay,
Yes, we can.
that's okay. So thank you, Elizabeth, for that lovely introduction. And yeah, thank you everyone for making the time, for being here on this Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. I know the energy levels are probably, at a low, but for choosing to want to learn and show up, I really appreciate it. So, I chose the topic of business analysis rather, and deriving requirements that add value, because often it's something that, even I'm not sure, where the audience is at, if you had just finished university or you have years of experience, but it's sometimes good to have a refresher. And, depending on your role, you sometimes don't necessarily work on new enhancements or requirements where you have to go through the process of gathering the requirements to build something completely new. A lot of the time when we start our roles, there's often systems, or legacy systems that exist, and yeah, we just then kind of have to build on from that. So let's dig into it. And then just one thing that I did want to mention, I know I said technology professional, but I have been a worked as a business analyst and project manager, and did a bit of testing. So I've been between, um, yeah, those functions. I just was like, yeah. Also, business analyst could be used as a product owner. Some companies use the term product owner or business analyst. They're very similar. Both require you to understand business needs, or to understand the business to enable you to build a solution that fits the business problem. So I think that, I don't know, from the audience, how many like people have, yeah, worked as a business analyst, or is interested in that role, or have years of experience, maybe. But yeah, it would just be interesting to know where you're at. But I'm going to give you more of a my experience and what helped me in, and how we do things specifically. So yeah, feel free to, if you do something different, engage, or if you have a better way of doing something, yeah, just reach out or give suggestions, or even after the session, um, definitely connect. But yeah, let's get into it. So as a business analyst, we are often, the link between the the client, so the person who wants us to build the system, or and the development team. And the challenge comes when we it's a completely, we don't understand the requirement or the solution that we're building. And I think that an important part of, so in this situation, when you build a new system, or you you completely understand the value, ask questions, so that when you document, it's as detailed and granular level as possible. And what I found when doing the documentation for um, my specification, so we I usually refer to it as a BRS because it has user stories and user journeys, but it's also has enough business context. So typically how a requirement would come through is something like a URS, user requirement specification from a client or internal describing the problem and saying what the expected solution is, or saying what the expected outcome is. And often, the business doesn't always think of all the various challenges or the true derived value that you're going to get. So, your role as a business analyst is to always question and ask as many questions about the process so that when you document it, firstly, the value or the purpose of the system is meeting the business problem. And secondly, that there's enough detail for the person, the developer who's building it, to actually work on it. So, for example, we got your unclear requirements cause misalignment and wasted effort. So I always find it easy for me or for my developer to understand a user story. It is not the um, go-to way of, or the, you have to do it that way, but it gives a clear um, journey of what you want to achieve with the system. And I'll go through how to write a user story in the next slides. Um, yeah, and then with business and developers. So when you're writing a document, you or your specification, it's very important that you don't assume that developers understand the business jargon, and you don't, have too much detail that's too technical for the business. So as the business analyst, you kind of have to play the role of documenting the requirements clear enough and including a glossary or terms that make sense as granular as possible so that the developers can understand. And then at the same time, when you're explaining to business or the impact of the solution or the functionality, you need to be specific in realizing that you can't go too technical because sometimes your client doesn't understand all the technical jargon. So you have to be a high level but enough detail for them to understand and not get confused with some of the terminology. And yeah, so that's the challenges, is writing requirements that actually we get right the first time and solves the business problem. So how do we bridge the gap, and how do we get specifications that are clear and are that are clear and that results in actually getting the solution or the problem solved? So the approach that we take is that we often have a BA, the person who interacts with the client. The client will come in and say they want a specific system built. And then we go through workshops of setting up sessions, firstly, reading through the documentation and understanding, because oftentimes you don't actually know that industry or their business process. And I find that what helps with that process of going through the workshops is going and doing some research about the terminology. So for example, if it's a supply chain finance system that they want built, a application that manages the calculator that they need, then you need to go up and maybe research some of the, just a high level read up, but often they would give you a, like I said, a user requirement specification. And as you work in industry or work as a BA, you kind of know what questions to kind of prompt, like why do you need this? And you can also sometimes, when you have user interface experience, like with the front end or building requirements, you can kind of give them recommendations. So for example, if the business wants a calculator that they need to send to external parties to track, you would also then maybe recommend that you should have like on the top of the screen a status field and kind of cater for different, user stories or steps if your process, what happens in a success, what happens if the system fails, like each step, and you can break it down. So I always say, or we always maintain, before actually going and looking at a spec template that you maybe your company has or you have, start just with a blank document and start like writing headings. What's the problem, the business problem, an introduction, and then getting just the user stories, or even just start with what kind of functionality or what behavior you want the system to do. And then you kind of go granular. And then as you go through the first workshop and the second workshop, you then interact with the client and you can go through the granular level of thinking like, we didn't actually take this into consideration. So yeah, that's really very important, is the workshops, to have workshops and engage as often with the client, because the more questions you ask upfront, the easier it comes when you actually have planned delivery timelines for, you know, then you don't have to go back and forth or any dependencies on items. So that's one of the things that I found. And then also communicating with the client, like it's also the BA's role to ensure that they are updated and drive that collaboration to get the client involved and to see like what value that they are going to get with the system and how easier it's going to make their lives and get them excited about it. Um, cool. So then I think sometimes also we tend to focus a lot on documentation. And I think that when we're writing requirements or user stories or functionality, it's important to ensure that you also focus on the value of what you're actually doing and not just, over document processes, because sometimes that's why, like I said, I prefer the user story approach or the functional requirements, because just paragraphs and paragraphs of documentation, the developers, I don't want to throw any developers under the bus, but reading that sometimes becomes painful to go through so much documentation. And I find that if you have it, keep it simple and clear, and then it's easy to actually understand what um, what is required. And what I also do with my functional specification is include a acceptance criteria, because this allows the developer to build a requirement and ensure that when they build this screen, like the login journey, they the acceptance criteria would be, for example, when the user clicks on the application link, it takes them to the login screen. When they add their email and password, it then takes them to the home page or the dashboard. Then the developer knows, okay, once this is complete, my ticket or my task is actually done, and they can test. And once everything passes, then it can move on to the next person. It's actually complete. So it kind of gives them those kind of guidelines, because often what happens if you're not clear of what your functional requirement requires, then you don't get it. It kind of leaves a room for ambiguity or not clarity of what's the outcome of this ticket and what do I need to do. So I think that's really important to have an acceptance criteria section. And I can show you an example of that after this. Um, and then also, like I said, ensure requirements are testable and traceable and also updated, because what often happens is once you've completed the spec, business got sign off, then you start working on things, and then you realize like, okay, we didn't actually cater for this, and maybe this is a change or enhancement that needs to be catered for. Then that needs to come through and actually come through as a change request. So it's always good to ensure that all your requirements are documented, and anything that comes afterwards is a change request, because it can get, I'd say, tricky when you realize, okay, this is not here at least you have evidence that your documentation was signed off in business, or the owner agreed that this is the requirements or the spec that we agree on, and anything that comes after this documentation or this after this is a change request, a scope, um, increase in scope, enhancement, or yeah. And then like I said, also ensure your requirements are testable and traceable. So even have it in a document, have it in using a true tracking tool, Jira as well, to store your tickets or your user stories. Yes, I see Vuyo has his hand up. Hi, Vuyo.
Hello, I wanted to ask, like, what did you say is better for communicating the requirements? Would it be like the user story, like you described, or like a use case diagram to communicate like the requirements to the developer?
So I know developers like diagrams, and often, so I would say it's good to have, if the process is very intense, like there's a lot of scenarios, then I would do a diagram. Um, and but if it's I'll do my user story, and then I'll also do a process flow with a diagram to show him that what happens, because sometimes with the user story and it's more, I'd say, complex, it's good to have a visual process flow of the outcome. So for example, we had a new application that we had to build for a supply finance company, that they wanted a online calculator application. And one of the journeys was they wanted to invite the supplier, being able to give them the link. So it was a whole process. They didn't want to give them access, and then they wanted to hide the screen. So we needed to, so for that user story, I did a user story, and then I also did a diagram displaying like what should happen if the link expired, what should happen if the person didn't register in time. So like a whole process flow to see like the different scenarios.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for your question. Yeah, so I think visual is definitely helpful, like any diagrams, because sometimes just documentation, it gets very convoluted and it escapes them. So I think definitely add diagrams and flows where necessary, because obviously for a login journey, if you're having like 50 user stories, like we had literally like I think about 50 user stories. I try not to go too granular, because some of the things, you know, with like login journey, I that catered for success journey and the failure journey. So you know, then it becomes like you can't do a diagram for each one, because it's going to take a lot of time. So like I'd say then you do diagrams for the complex ones. Yeah, cool. So yeah, that's writing requirements that give good value. Then yeah, so like I said, practical tips is definitely understand the business context first, because it doesn't make sense for you as a business analyst to write a solution of or requirements if you don't understand what this company is, what's their journey. And I think even for yourself, if you need to like draw diagrams to visualize that, even if it's a basic one, then you can. Um, just to touch back on diagrams, what we did was we had a UI UX person in our team who's amazing at Figma. So for screens and stuff, she would update the screens for us, and that really helped the developers to see on exactly what's expected on the screen, because it kind of simulated what the system would look like. And it's really quite cool. Figma has quite cool features where you can like interact with the screens as well. It kind of simulates like having a new screen. Yeah, so definitely for yourself would be understanding what is this business doing, what what's the problem. So like in our situation, the problem was quite simple. They were using Excel to manage this supply chain calculator, and obviously it was very tedious and a lot of like manual processes. So they wanted something, an online application. Um, ask clarifying questions. Ask them, questions. There's sometimes terminology that you might not be familiar with because it's specific to an industry that you've never worked with or you just don't know. So ask questions. Um, you know, what what is the system trying to achieve? What is the process? And often they will give you like a little paragraph about the business and what's the problem. We were lucky that we got a document that was kind of like a user requirement. So it gave us the the user problem and what they would like, and they were quite detailed. So that was very helpful to give us some, understanding of their daily processes and what they would want the system to look like. So then I took that and broke it down and went through that and created my user stories before even creating my document and then putting everything into my document. And I was like, when I started, I was like, oh, it's only 10 pages. And then when I ended, it ended up with like 60 pages because as you work on it, you kind of go deeper and you add more detail and you add your acceptance criteria. So, yeah, so definitely ask clarifying questions. Keep the language simple and clear. So often we think, okay, if we use fancy language or words, we try to be smart, but it's that's nice too. But I think when you're writing requirements, you use simple terminology. It's the more simple and clear it is, the easier it is to work with, and keep the sentences short. Sometimes it shouldn't be too long paragraphs describing something. Um, yeah, and then validate early and validate often. So I always believe, like, as you start writing your documentation, even if you want a quick call, we actually had the client on Teams. It was a client we worked for the first time, so they were like comfortable with adding them on Teams, and we would also send formal emails. But it was cool to have someone from their side on Teams so we could engage often. But like things that, so if it was a quick question on something that we thought of, we would add it to the Teams channel. But if it was something that needed like confirmation and email tracking or record of, then we'd obviously send an email for stuff like that. But sometimes you're working on a document, and instead of waiting for an email response, it was easier just to quickly message and be like, we're working on this. We just wanted to check how this process works, or can we schedule a quick call? And they were very, very chilled, and they even welcomed us to, reach out via Teams more than email. Um, yeah. So that's just some practical tips with writing your documentation or clear. Yeah. So sorry, my slides were okay. Cool. So this is just saying that requirements are a tool for delivering value. So at the end of the day, the requirement should be clear and adding some value to what the developer is building. Um, it's often sometimes we get so stuck in the detail and the granularity of things, we don't often ask, what is this actually solving, and or is this really needed? So for example, some things are more nice to have, and if you are really on a cost budget, that the client has a specific budget, then it's often good to like just focus on the minimal viable requirements that's going to really add value and make their life easier as soon as possible, where some things can actually wait because they're more nice to haves. So it's really just about understanding what are the key requirements. Obviously, in our case, the login journey was key. The ability to add the suppliers was like the whole point of the system, and the calculator itself. So those were the main things that we needed to add for them, and they wanted to have different views of this calculator. So if they log in as simulate the login for a supplier journey as a normal user, so there was different journeys. So those were the core things that we had to ensure we were catering for them. at that point in time because that was the value that they were deriving. Um, yeah, so this is more of from a coming from a project management perspective in the sense of just ensuring that if your requirements are clear and ready to build, it really saves time and cost. So the if you get your requirements right, it already makes things easier for the developers and in building something that is that the client actually wants or what was intended, and there's no back and forth or having to create bugs or defects because we missed something or it was not clearly understood. And I think that's the main thing, and people really underestimate this or really think is the analysis part is so important because it really impacts everything else, and it really adds a ripple effect because if you as a BA don't understand clearly what we're building and the process, when the developers come with their questions or when it's time to actually test this, you're like, okay, this is not working, this is not what they wanted. So I think getting it right the first time it really does cut costs and save time. Yeah, so I think from a business analyst perspective is really understanding the value of what you're building in so that you can document it clearly and answer questions. And also, besides just answering questions and writing a spec, you can also think, okay, I think this process would really be improved if we maybe, like I said, give them a status. Like, so it doesn't have to be, you know, an like out of the ordinary, extraordinary um functionality that you think of adding value. It just could be that what would add value to them and make their lives easier. So, for example, like I said, this just adding this a dashboard on the top to give them the status of where their calculator is for different suppliers. That would make their lives easy. And also, if by sending an email to follow up to suppliers who haven't logged in and they their link is about to expire, that would save them the manual time of tracking which suppliers logged in and all of that. So just ideas that kind of like adds value and makes sense and makes the client's work easier or their process easier. So like I said, write clear and simple requirements and then check in continuously. And then, yeah, so I wanted to show you just a user story. This was just not a real requirement. So I don't know if I need to stop sharing here and reshare this document that I have. I'm just going to see if this works. Okay. Okay. Can you see the Word document? Uh,
Yes, we can see.
Okay, cool. So this was something we, uh, not a real requirement. We made it for our interns to do, and this was typically the how we get a requirement will come in through a little bit of background. What is the system about? So they would say that they wouldn't really give you the name of we want an online management. They'll say we want a system that's able to provide users with an easy way to borrow and return books. Um, the system will need to cater for readers and librarians. So just a little background of what the system is. And they give you a little bit of a user role. And then this is actually what I wanted to show you is the functional requirements. So it could sometimes come as simple as what the functional requirements is or what the system needs to do. Users can create an account with a unique username and password. User can log in and out securely. User can reset their password if forgotten. So you sometimes the functional requirements doesn't have to use elaborate words. It could be as simple as just writing what the system needs to do and then having your diagram or your however else. And then you can take this and turn it into a user story. And then, yeah, a user story can be as a user. So, whatever the actor is, it could be a user or a system. I would like to log in, create an account with the unique username and password so I can log in securely. So just so that what the user's purpose or end goal is. So it kind of gives the person who's building this the idea of what the actor to simulate in what the person intends, and then what's the action. So like to create an account with the username and password, and so it kind of gives you the purpose and value. And I think that's why user story is really important, because then you can actually see what's the intended outcome, what's the actual point of this requirement. So yeah, it depends. You don't always get the different, you don't always get like a user document test. Sometimes it might just be something simple, and the requirement might come through in a one line word. It depends on who your client and how they document things. But typically, when there's a requirement come through, you usually get like a user requirement, and then yeah, if it's an existing system that you just doing enhancements on an existing system, then it's not as it's just updating the URS or creating this one page, giving you that. If it's obviously, like I said, building a new system, then you kind of get a more detailed version your of the documentation. So with our side, when we had to build the not this yeah the supply chain system with the online calculator, they gave us I think it was a good couple of pages, and they even told us how they would like the screens to look out. So they really did quite a bit of the work in the sense of what they want, and then it was easy for us to go through that document because it was quite detailed, and then break it up into the user stories, the diagrams and stuff. Because sometimes the problem is with using templates is you get stuck in, you see all these headings, and sometimes you don't need all of those sections. It's not really relevant. So all I did was I started my user stories, and once I got to those sections, what was relevant to me, I added things, so obviously background, introduction, all of those, and took out all the unnecessary sections where it didn't really, it's not anything that I needed. So yeah, I think I just wanted to share this to show you like what a user requirement could look like if you haven't seen one. But it differs depending on the industry and how different businesses write. But usually it's a document that just stipulates high level of what they want, and then you can take it to the team. What we do is also have like a session, grooming session, or discussion of the requirements with the team, and then we can break it down, add it to a sprint, and create the document and create the tasks for it. So yeah, that's basically really business analyst analysis and writing requirements that add value. I think keeping it simple is really the key. Understanding it and applying your mind, and yeah, then you're good to go and ask questions. Yeah, so if there's any questions, we can get into it. Elizabeth, um, is there any questions that you can see if anyone typed in? Elizabeth, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Are you able to?
Yeah, I was just asking if there's any questions on the commentary.
Okay. Sorry, there are no questions on the chat, and I've got a couple of questions, and thank you very much for the insightful presentation as well. And I think um, I just want to also reiterate what you just said. The requirements needs to be kept simple and straightforward in a language that it is understandable. And I think that is what we say the misunderstanding comes in when we use big words, we complicate the process, we're trying to do so much, we write too many words on a piece of paper, and that the message get lost. So I like the fact that you mentioned that it needs to be short, simple, and clear. Feroza, I've got some couple of questions because
Sure.
you came on and you threw some words there and there, and for the benefit of everyone who's here, maybe
Yeah.
people don't even know what Jira is. If you can just explain to them what Jira is,
Sure. Sorry.
because you mentioned it a couple of times, and I felt like, ah, what is Jira?
Jeera, is this a spice, an Indian spice? I know that they use the word jeera for a spice back home. Cool. So Jira is basically, and there's different tools that are used to track um, requirements or track delivery. So there's Jira, there's Monday.com, there's a few other online tools. So basically, it's like you create a task and you'll assign it to the developer, and then that task will move to in progress. It's basically a tracking tool in simple terms. And then that the developer will build it and then assign it to you, the BA, to test, or whoever is the tester. So it tracks the workflow of inception of the requirement to its end of its life cycle. It's closed, it's done, it's completed. And then that's a good way for traceability. If you ever need to go back, you can check how much work your developer has, how many tasks you have, how many analysis tasks you need to look into. It keeps track of, like, I think I'd say backlog. I'm not sure, but basically backlog is what the term means. It's literally all your tasks that you still need to do. It's not currently in progress. So yeah, that's Jira. It's a tracking tool.
Right. Cool. The other terminology you used was the UI. What is UI?
UI is user interface. So this is like your front. Think of your screen now. Think of an online screen. It's your user interface. So the designing of, say, the Superb List. You shouldn't use names, but any like online store. Um, it's basically the design of that, the user, how you engage with a system. So like how it looks and appeals.
Okay. And then lastly, in terms of your three or two words, letter words, URS. What is it?
So as yeah, so like I said, that's a user requirement specification. So you get that's what like the client would give you as the BA, and then you're like, okay, now I need to go and create my documentation for the developer to build. Sorry, I didn't know how granular to go with what the audience. I thought like some of you might be already professionals working in the industry as well. So yeah, it's
Yeah. Okay. So unfortunately, the majority of the people who are part of the session, they are still either at the university or they are just started working. And
okay.
the majority of them don't have IT background. So I've got, yeah, people who comes from market research, digital marketing, software engineering, building
Uh,
engineering. So it's a diverse group. But that doesn't mean that they don't have to understand what business analysis is and
yeah,
what
because
it
look,
does, because I think it's a valuable tool that everyone in the business needs to understand and know.
yeah, so it's even if you are in market research or you're in a different industry, you might not be analysis is something a skill that it's so important to have because it enables you to really break down a process. So even if you're doing document a research or whatever, it's so good to just start with a diagram. And you learn some of these things from business analyst is thinking why. So asking why do we need this, you ask why 5 times, they say. And that's just to make sure you completely understand something and you understand the value, so that if you understand that, you become the expert in that area, or it enables you to do your market research or do whatever you need to do. It's just breaking down complex problems and creating, you know, making it easy for you to understand or the person to understand. So it's really a skill that, is valuable in whatever field that you are in.
Um, what would be the most single underappreciated skill for a business analyst working across multiple diverse teams?
Yeah, so I think you get caught in the middle because you kind of the client comes to you. You have to know where um everything is, explain the high level way, the technical, how we're building it. You don't have to go in the detail of the technical stuff, but you need to understand it enough so you can speak to the client. So if there's any things you get, if you are not on time or you deal with the client directly, which sometimes is not always the easiest, because if you're behind or you have to have a tough conversation, you're like, okay, this actually was not in the document and we not did not agree on it. You have to be quite assertive and be like, you know, no, we cannot commit to this because the team, yeah, so you have to be the one who's kind of assertive and answering to the client and engaging with the client, but you also have to then work with the development team to make sure that they understand, because they could sometimes ask you 10 questions and make sure like they understand what they're building, because you are constantly between two. So I think it's definitely being bearing the brunt of the development team, or not the brunt, the that ownership where you need to know where everything is, and engaging with the client, because it's you are representing um the team and you speak in behalf of the team, really. Because yeah, so I think that's really puts you in a difficult shoes, because the development team will think, oh, you're just adding on requirements, you're just expecting us to do this now. And then the client is also like, okay, but why can't you just add this? So you need to really be level headed and assertive to say no when it's pushing boundaries. And yeah,
Yeah.
that could be difficult.
Okay, I think you covered the topic. The one last question that I also wanted to ask is, how do you then deal with a difficult client?
Yeah, so dealing with a difficult client, you have to be firstly um very get all your facts. Like firstly get the facts and take out emotion, because often we as humans, it's natural for us to get frustrated or upset. This person is demanding that I deliver this. They did not agree with it. They're not understanding the process. You have to like firstly take out the emotion and go and look at the facts. What are they asking? Are they being reasonable? Is it fair? Did we as the team mess up? So it's we need to take ownership and put in extra hours to deliver this requirement. Or this client is just being unreasonable and I need to have a serious chat with them. So you'd be like, in a tone, I always maintain that assertive tone, but actually um, respectful still. So I would say like, we documented the requirement, you have signed off the spec. This is what we agreed. However, anything else after this was not agreed to, and we will not be able to take on this change or this requirement. So I think it's just getting the facts in order, and then stating in a assertive tone, because sometimes you have to say like, no, I cannot, we cannot do it, but just not say no. And then you present the facts. We cannot do it because it was not agreed, because the team is at full capacity, and you state that, and then you understand. And I feel like it's always good to do this via call, because email sometimes take away the emotion, not the emotion, I mean, like takes away from misinterpreting the words or the tone. So I think it's very important to have a quick call and just discuss it and explain to them the facts. And yeah, and sometimes you have to say, yes, we have messed up and we will have to actually take ownership of that. So I think that's, yeah, that's how I would deal with a difficult client.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions, comments from Vuyo? I see your hand is up. You can unmute.
I wanted to ask, like, are there any like technical skills that you need for to become like a business analyst? Because like I saw you, I heard you mention something about Figma.
Okay, so Figma is more of like a tool to draw, like screens. So say for example, if you go onto any online site, Figma allows you to create like a replica of that site, or to draw how the system would look. So that can really be, there's a lot of courses that teach that. Figma is not too technical. I'd say like you can go and self-learn that. Um, but I think with a business analyst, definitely if you get any technical skills, like any courses that allows you to maybe do some development, it really enables you when you do deal with a developer, because it becomes um, difficult if you have no technical. I would say it's a requirement, but it's definitely say to make your job much easier if you have some technical skills, because then you can really understand when the developer says we cannot deploy because the code has all these issues and all this technical terminology. So I'd say rather also familiarize yourself with technical terminology, and do maybe some developers course or 101, so that you just get some technical skills to enable you as a business analyst. But it's not required to become a business analyst. It'll just make your life much easier.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? Okay. In the absence of any other questions, thank you very much, Feroza, for sharing with us your practical tips, your insights, your takeaways, and for being here with us this evening. You could have decided to go and spend it with family or do something, but you've decided to come and share your insights with us, and we really appreciate. And also, thank you to all the attendees who came on board and to come and listen and participate in this session. Let's show some love to Feroza by clapping hands or using the emojis. Come, guys. Let's appreciate. If we love the content, let's show some love, some clapping. There we go. So with that, Feroza, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Even
Elizabeth. Before I
tomorrow.
leave, I just wanted to say to anyone, if you have any other questions you think of, you can add me on LinkedIn, and if you're interested. And yeah, I'm always happy to share anything that might add any value or give you more perspective in the role of business analyst. Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks, everyone, for your time. Have a beautiful evening.
Thank you and have a lovely evening, everyone. Bye.